Hi everyone, my name is Mayu Suzuki and welcome back to our fourth episode of Warwick International Development Society's Career Profiles. This series is dedicated to sharing the knowledge, experience and insights from Warwick alumni working across the development sector. You can check out our other episodes for more interviews with inspirational professionals. Today we are joined by Mahmoud Mohildin. After obtaining his PhD in economics from Warwick, he has worked with the World Bank and the Ministry of Investment in Egypt while teaching economics and finance at Cairo University and at a number of renowned universities. In academia, he has authored numerous publications and articles. He has also held a variety of leading positions in think tanks, research centers, and academic institutions, including the World Economic Forum, Royal Economic Society, and American Economic Association. With his rich knowledge and experience in international finance and development, he is now appointed as the Special Envoy on financing the 2030 Agenda by the United Nations. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be back to work, even virtually, but I'm very happy to have this interview and discussion with you today.
Thank you. So my first question is, what are your main interests and what is your mission?
Well, my work currently with the UN system that started in February, when it was designed in terms of the terms of reference or the job description, it had a completely different emphasis of the kind of work that I'm doing now because of COVID. So as a special envoy of the UN Secretary General on financing the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda, I had the mandate, and I still have it, to support the implementation of the finance for development for the SDGs. 17 goals, 169 targets. What's common in them all that they need all finance. In order to achieve any of these goals, you need finance. And for that, there is a framework, the Finance for Development Agenda, or the 2030 Financing Agenda, that covers public finance, private finance, domestic resources, external finance, role of trade, debt management, role of technology, and data systems to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So my job as a special envoy, while there are many specialized entities in the UN system and the development organizations and the development finance institutions, my job with my small team is to support the internal and external coordination to achieve these goals, to mobilize the finance and investments to achieve these goals. And given that at the beginning of my work, I've been spotting that there are problems related to public finance, budgets, and public debt management, I found an opportunity to do more in this area. But after COVID-19, I had, with the support of the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, and the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, and many of the heads of entities and agencies and UN units, we had all to do more in the COVID-19 response and recovery. And that comes to me as well as a special envoy. So I was required to make major changes in the work in order, which is still within the framework on the finance for development, but in order to support the work of the system to achieve the goals. So my work in coordination with the different units and following up in a very important initiative led by the Secretary General back in March, he started this initiative And then we had, this is basically a socioeconomic response to the COVID-19 crisis, covering the short-term measures, the mid-term measures, and long-term. Then we had an important heads of state summit. The Secretary General with the Prime Ministers of Jamaica and Canada invited 50 heads of state and heads of organization. So I had an important meeting to discuss what we can do in different areas, from financing inclusive growth, dealing with the investments required for sustainability, dealing with debt crisis and how to prevent more defaults. And if defaults happen, how can we restructure the debts? And of course, there are aspects related to global financial liquidity and dealing with the challenges associated with illicit financial flows.
Because of both health and economic crisis, I think the progress of SDGs we've made thus far are sort of reverted. And I was wondering how we can respond and recover as quickly as possible.
There are a couple of reactions to your comment now. One is that crises are not new. The world has been facing a variety of crises. But as you mentioned, it's not just one crisis happening at the same time. We have many of them. We have a health crisis, we have an economic crisis, and we have a potential debt crisis that we need to avoid. Mind you, during the financial crises of the emerging financial crisis of 1997 in Asia, or the more recent crisis, the global financial crisis of 2008, the effort of the authorities, governments, central banks, was to prevent a financial crisis from becoming a crisis in the real economy, and preventing any kind of a deterioration in the real economy to impact the welfare of the people by enhancing the social protection. But now what we have is three crises at the same time. The welfare of the people is being affected by the health side. The real economy is deteriorating. We have a recession measured by contraction of the global economy by an average of 5%. We have job losses. At some stage, the ILO estimated that to be more than 400 million jobs. We have a decline of trade by no less than 20%. FDI, foreign direct investment, is in decline by no less than 35 to 40%. Remittances of workers abroad are in decline of by no less than 20%. So this is a kind of a very serious situation, even if it doesn't really have the more important aspect, which is the health challenge and the health issues of concern. In itself, the real economy side crises are very much overwhelming the societies and the economies. And unfortunately, before the crisis, there was some serious warning of a fourth wave of debt affecting countries. So we need really to handle the whole scenario that we are facing today in a better way, in designing policies, getting institutions to be more effective and agile, and do more in the financing side to support the activities in the field.
And also the pandemic COVID-19 also affected the most vulnerable people the worst, so widening the wealth inequality gap. I was wondering if you think that universal basic income, as some people are pointing out, would be effective?
Well, issues related to inequality and discrepancy have been noted for quite some time now. There is that report that was issued a few months ago before the crisis on the World Inequality Report, that is basically spotting greater discrepancy within countries and across countries, based on income, based on non-income measures of equality, and on the opportunities as well. That is basically telling us that these kind of discrepancies are going to be lasting further in the future, and that has a big meaning in the practical sense when you are dealing with the crisis that we are facing today.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we say that we are all exposed to a perfect storm, yes, this is right, but we are not all in the same good, well-maintained ship or boat.
Mm-hmm.
People are in different boats. Some of them are weak, some of them are strong, some of them are almost wrecked. And even within these boats, there are people who are in well-protected areas in the boat and others who are more vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
So vulnerability here is a very big issue that we need really to consider. How to consider it in the midterm and long term is by investing in people,
Mm-hmm.
in their health, in human capital, in upskilling them, in giving them opportunities. But in the short term, different means and ways of social protection,
Mm-hmm.
including universal basic income that you mentioned, could be employed. Some of these experiments perhaps are promising that universal basic incomes could be there for quite some time, not just during the crisis. But as we saw in some particular countries dealing with the problems of the informal workers, for instance, or the workers in the informal sector, who are not normally, by the very definition, they are not registered in the system, they are not known to the formal sector or the formal economy. So they started to register them using technology, which is good use of technology. You can do it now faster than the old ways of paperwork and people queuing forever to do that kind of registration. But the issue is from where you can really get this kind of money and how to prevent abuse, because some people may get it while they can't really do without it. And the countries and their budgets are always limited with the constraints of the revenue, especially the tax revenue they get. So there are lots of discussions now about better targeting and how to mobilize the resources better to deal with this issue. The universal basic income was presented strongly during the last couple of years before COVID-19 as a way to deal with the implication of what's called the fourth industrial revolution, that the second machine age was going to impact the opportunities of work. So the thinking was basically what we are going to be doing with those who are going to be made redundant because the machine had replaced them in the workplace until they are getting training or searching for another sector. So the idea came that, well, in order to minimize inequality and to maintain security and the peace in the society, you need to consider something like universal basic income. But as it is mentioned, universal means that you are going to be working across a sector with averages. Basic, that doesn't really cover many items that you may wish to consume, and be it an income that you are going to be dependent on it as a source of revenue for quite some time. Some countries are more capable in doing that than others, and but this is very much becoming a strong argument. But the worry is here that you don't need to put it without really putting it in the context of social protection and giving people as well the opportunity to work, because work is not just about earning income, but it is about contribution, about proving yourself in the society, about giving back, about being part of a network, part of a system, upgrading your opportunities and skills and development in your human skills in the work and beyond. So that shouldn't really be taken as an incentive not to work, because the ideal situation is for the people who are capable of work, happy with the salaries available, is to be given an opportunity to work.
So I think you mentioned that for mid-run response, it's important to invest in human capital, so for education. But as COVID-19 revealed, that some people have good access to internet as everything is moving digital now, but some people have less access to internet and also devices, which I believe is creating further educational gaps. How do you think it's important to invest in things that allow people to access the internet, or what is the priority to promote better education for everyone?
We mentioned inequality before, but the report that came out from the UNDP talking about the inequality in the 21st century is basically about this new kind of digital divide or digital dividend. Digital solutions can create good opportunities for access of information, for knowledge, for getting better skills, for being part of this world and its markets. But if you don't really have access to the internet, if you don't really have access to electricity, like 900 million people who do not really have good quality of access to electricity, or even the very access to it is not there in many, in hundreds of millions of Africans, they don't have electricity at all. So here that you can really talk about this issue of discrepancy. Even when they talk about schools coming back online, and even in some advanced and rich economies, like the United States, where I live now, the people say that the issue of having access is an item of luxury that cannot be afforded by many people. And that's why some of the universities are trying to make programs to provide the funding for their students to subscribe or give them vouchers that could be used only for internet access. So this issue of digital divide and digital dividend, and the investment in quality of education, not just education. In the past, you remember during the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, which preceded the Sustainable Development Goals, the discussion was basically about basic education, primary education, measured by some quantitative measures. Now the quality is much more important. Of course, it needs the quantity to be satisfied, but quality is important as well. There is a human capital project that was produced by the World Bank, covering different aspects of health and education. And you'll be seeing the ranking of countries. I think Singapore was #1 in this human capital index, followed by Korea, followed by Japan, and then you see many OECD countries. And unfortunately, the countries that need this kind of human capital more, because they don't really have fiscal capital, and the natural capital has been eroded as well. They need to take these investments in human capital seriously. And I mean here, the low income and middle income countries, they need to invest more in health and education. But how can you do that if you have budget constraints? So this is the whole thing about partnerships, that you can really bring the private sector with solutions to help you as well in that field.
What role specifically does private sector have in those countries?
Well, you know, the private sector always look at risk and return. And unfortunately, the perceived risk in many developing economies could be higher than the real risk. But because of the lack of information and lack of updates, people are just settled with what they see of the perceived risk. There could be opportunities in infrastructure. Even in the social sector, there could be great opportunities. But because of the perceived risk, like problems related to political stability, security, corruption, all of that, And what is being measured as well as doing business. You may be familiar with the doing business report that comes every year from the IFC of the World Bank, measuring, and the World Bank at large now is doing it. It started with the IFC, and then the World Bank Group is doing the doing business report, and it ranks countries based on the ease of doing business, and it covers different areas. So if your country happens to be number 140, it would lose a chance compared to the country that is 120, and both will be losing a chance if your country is in the top 50 in the ease of doing business. While this measure is focusing on the domestic or local investments, but foreign investors look at it as well to see if you are not treating your own incumbent businesses well, it is very hard really to convince new investors to come. So I think this is the area that you need really to work hard on to attract the business sector. Otherwise, you'll be dependent on budget. The budget will be constrained by less revenue, and that will take longer until you achieve all of these goals. That's why some of the countries, unfortunately, will not achieve their 2030 development agenda because of lack of finances, even if they have the opportunities.
Speaking of investment, how do you see green investment? Do you think this is important for sustainable development in future?
Yeah, you are right. It's important to take green investment seriously. However, I like to put it within the context of sustainable investment, because that gets you into different varieties as well of investments that are basically about this kind of new green sustainable economy. There is some blue investment if you are investing in the oceans and cleaning up the oceans and dealing with the plastic waste. There are gender investment that could be seen in variety of bonds linked to gender and inclusion of women in the workplace. So, and that's why I like to take the measures of impact investing that are coming out from the IFC or the sustainability definition that came out from the GISD, which is the Global Investors for Sustainable Development. This is a network or alliance of top institutions working in various areas of business, but trying to filter their business. First, take out all of the negatives that could really be harming the environment or contributing to inequality or not to be in adherence to the ESG, which is environment, social, and governance rules. And then trying to link their activities not just to the financial returns, which are important. Without financial returns and profits, you cannot survive. But you need to make that in a sustainable way. And now, with all of these new rules of engagement, to take issues related to sustainability seriously and to disclose what you are doing, in the field. What you were disclosing as a company in the past, as a kind of a voluntary arrangement, now you'll be required to provide, based on a metric and a criteria and standards, you'll disclose in a involuntary way, as disclosure is going to be mandatory. If you are borrowing from banks or you are registering your company, that will be required in order to have this kind of disclosure for sustainability.
Okay, thank you. Slight shift, but so I believe you also teach economics and finance in a number of universities. What are the challenges in working in those two fields?
Well, since I graduated from work, I always had a kind of a portfolio of things. And actually, even when I was at work, I was trying to maintain a portfolio of functions. So the issue of maintaining a portfolio that in any stage of my life, even when I was a minister back home in Egypt, I kept teaching. When I was a minister, I kept teaching each Saturday from 6 to 9 p.m. at Cairo University. The subject was money banking and financial markets.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a great deal of benefit in knowledge sharing when you are doing that. It's never a one way. When you are with the students, with younger generation of people, they challenge you all the time with your questions, with their expectations, with their different ways of thinking of matters. So they keep you always alerted to the change. And I tried to make my lectures always in a kind of a conversational way. It's not really one way. I learned that from work and from many of my professors as well at Cairo University and from York University, where I did my master's degree. When I was at work, while I was doing my research for PhD, the department trusted me to be a tutor. So I taught principles of economics and development economics to the undergrads. And I was very active as well in the student life. And I'm happy to tell you, as reflected in that letter by Professor Marcus Miller, that I co-established the first economist club of Warwick University. So if you see that economist club of the Students' Union, and you think of the history of that economist club, that was myself and a colleague of mine, Professor now Peter Wright, who is a professor at Reading University, I think now. He's one of the very well-known economists in the labor economics field. I'm happy that this economist club invited me in one of their offsprings. Warwick has the Warwick Economic Summit every year, which is very popular. So the Warwick Economic Summit is one of the offsprings of that economist club.
I see.
Yeah, so actually it came as one of their activities many years back. And now it has a standalone kind of persona, and it's very popular. And I was happy that I participated with them in 2018, back in February, I think it was the meeting with them. Very popular. They bring students from all over the world. I think this year they are going to be doing it virtually. So I'm happy with these kind of activities, not just to have a kind of a portfolio you are in. It's like when I was at the World Bank as well. I kept relationship with the number of universities, as you mentioned. And from time to time, I get invitations to provide lectures in many universities in Africa, in Europe, and in the United States.
So thinking about future this time, where probably we will have more advanced technology, and also AI will be coming into our life more and more commonly. I think our labor market will be greatly disrupted. And how do you think we can build resilience so that we are best prepared?
So if you want to develop this kind of, I would say, agile economy that benefits from the empowerment of its system and its power and its controls at the same time, by digitalization and the fourth industrial revolution, you need to get the people prepared. You need to invest in DNA, the data systems, the networks, and the artificial intelligence. This is the other acronym of DNA that I'm using here, not the usual use. But you need to take that seriously, and in all aspects of work, even if you are not really in a science field, you need really to take this DNA very seriously. This is the way that can allow you access and sharing your ideas and enhancing your presence in the market. Of course, people will be benefiting many people will be benefiting from that, as it happened in the first industrial revolution. Those who capture it further and be ahead, they will be ahead as well in their income and their returns. And that's why we see this kind of growth of the big names of digital and technology companies. But now what will happen with the traditional sector? We need really to have a system of incentives and a system of taxes and a system of flexibility, of opportunity in order to minimize the kind of damage to the society that could really happen if there is one or two sectors are growing fast and the other sectors are not really catching up. This kind of attention needs to be given, not to complicate the progress of the sectors that are capturing the new technologies. Otherwise, you will be harming yourself dearly. But basically to enable those sectors and the projects that are lagging behind by, as I said, we mentioned the investment in human capital, but we need to invest in infrastructure as well, including digital infrastructure, to enable people to have better access. Otherwise, they will be with the skills, but without the opportunities of access, so they will end up frustrated. And then you need to invest as well in the resilience of society. You mentioned UBI or Universal Basic Income earlier, but this could be a kind of social protection system that really assures people that whatever happens, themselves and their families have a kind of a cushion that they can really depend on if anything goes wrong. And even if they are fine, like low middle income families in their countries, they can really educate their kids in an acceptable level of education. They can protect their health by a decent public health insurance system. They can really have the basic access to welfare, like parks, gardens, seas and rivers, all of these kind of benefits that you can really get access to by being a citizen with rights. And this needs really a new definition or redefinition of what's called the social contract, what you are providing to the state and what the state is providing to you. Competition, fairness, meritocracy are basically, and respect of the rules of the game are very much needed and warranted in order to have stable society and as peaceful as one would hope and wish.
So in your opinion, how would a successful social protection system would look like? What are the main characteristics and how should it be implemented?
The starting point should be the budget. Yeah. The budget is the most important statement that comes from a society. And I could be wrong, but I rank it just the second most important after the constitution of the country, because this is a piece, not just about revenue and expenditure, but this is a piece that reflects the priorities of the society. How much we are gaining from the taxes, how much we are gaining from the sovereign revenue, and how much we are spending and on what, and how we are spending the money. Is it in education? Is it in health? Is it in social protection? Or is it in some kind of waste? Or God forbid, as it is happening, unfortunately, that some of the money goes into wrong direction through corruption and illicit flows. So that taking the budget very much seriously here will really solve the problem of your question. Yes, everybody will take this issue. Yes, we need to protect our citizens. We need to have a good social protection system. And there are different ways. We only mentioned the UBI, but there are other ways of social protection and safety nets, conditional, non-conditional, all variety of transfers that could be maintained, all of the services that the society can provide with affordability, including affordable housing, including affordable education, affordable mobility, like in transport, all of that. But basically, is the budget speaking loud and clear on these areas or not? or we were just talking about these matters. So I think, and here the budget is not just the state budget. What we need to consider seriously is the local budget, the municipalities. During COVID-19, as you realize in your own community, they realize here, community has a very important role to support citizens and to provide the first support to the citizens in terms of healthcare, attention to the elderly, to the kids, to the neighborhood. So that needs really to be adequately funded.
Certainly. So do you have any final notes to young economists and professionals working or thinking of working in international development?
Well, I always position myself not in a kind of a position of advice, but basically to share experience. And I think I learned a great deal from my experience at Warwick University, and I think it was a kind of a full life, not just in the economic labs and the economics department lectures, and the hard work that we had to do, and the many visits to the library. I remember still Lib 1 and Lib 2. I don't know if they are existing with the same names or not, but the library and its function, in the absence of access to the internet at the time, it was very much fundamental. But Warwick really provides an excellent opportunity for the students to engage, not just in the scientific fields of their domains, but in the student's life, in the social life. And you need to take it fully. What I wanted to do more in, and I'm trying to catch up now, but Warwick as well gives you an opportunity to learn skills and to have your hobbies as much as you can with good time management. Unfortunately, I was more on the studying side and the economics society work, and a bit of work related to that with a couple of Middle Eastern societies. But I wish that I had spent more time in learning musical instruments, or being more professional in one of the sports. But Warwick taught me the value of learning continuously and for life, and to take the issues of engagement with knowledge and society seriously, and to have an open mind to different cultures, different backgrounds. And Warwick had this kind of great international student culture that at any time, in any classroom, even if you are 20 people or 20 students, you'll find 10 to 15 nationalities with you in the room. That gives you great access to knowledge, to culture, to diversity of ideas, and the engagement as well across generations. You see the young undergraduates, you see the older graduates and postgraduates, and then the more senior members of faculty. This is basically the best opportunity. You find it normally in universities, but not really with this kind of engaging way as I saw it at Warwick. And being isolated in a way, because at the time, now I know that Coventry is a city of culture for Europe, which is great. It was not really that way back in the 1990s. So the university during my time was offering everything, from the arts center to the sports, to the students' union activity, to the food outlets and everything. So I think my piece of experience here that I like to share, enjoy it fully while you are still having it at work.
Thank you. Maybe I should start picking up on some kind of sport because I don't do any sport. But thank you very much for your time today and sharing your valuable insights. And also big thanks to our audience for watching Career Profiles. If you enjoyed this episode, follow Warwick International Development Society's social media to keep updated on more content on international development and of course, our next episode of Career Profiles. Thank you.